So we'll start with our resident white dude, James Billow. James, white dudes for Kamala, Karens for Kamala. Is any of this, first of all, sanctioned by the campaign itself?
There doesn't seem to be any official affiliation with this whole white dude, white Karen club, but I was definitely in attendance last night. I don't know how you spent your Monday evening, but we had politicians, we had Hollywood actors, we had policy people, and there were over 190,000 signups, so this wasn't something to sniff at. First, we had Pete Buttigieg, Transport Secretary. He described himself as a policy guy, but here's what he had to say.
I'm a policy guy. I've never been totally comfortable with the truth that no matter how much you believe in your policies, so much of politics is just vibes.
So Mayor Pete talking about how incredible the vibes were, really good mood. He set the tone for the whole talk. But then it just got a little bit weirder and weirder as the stream went on. So we then had actor Josh Gad.
I'm not sure if you guys can recall that feeling you had on the night of Tuesday, November 8th, 2016. I stood over my kid's bed and I wept.
Pull out a few tissues for Josh. But before we then go into The West Wing's Bradley Whitford, a very iconic character, also from the film Get Out, where he promised that he would vote for Obama if he could do a third term. Seems to be channeling a lot of that character.
He is just as insufferable as his West Wing character and all of the West Wing fans that revere his West Wing character.
What a variety of whiteness we have here. We got the dude, we got Pete. It's like a rainbow of beige.
A rainbow of beige is how he described it. Not quite sure how he arrived at that tonal palette, but weirdly enough, the New York Times seems to quite like it. So we've got a screenshot here. Liberal white dudes rally for Harris. It's like a rainbow of beige. A huge video call for self-professed white dudes for Harris showed the breadth of Democratic support for her candidacy and the ways the party is learning to make fun of itself. Now, okay, that's all well and good. There was a lot of fun and cheer and bon homie, but there was something else at play here too. And I think there was a real contrast between the politicians on the show and the Hollywood actors, and it seemed to conceal just what was going on, a growing divide within the Democrat Party. Because a lot of the folks on vibes and these kind of culturally infused messages seem to basically draw away from the more old school pro-labor types who we see have a completely different set of policy priorities. Now, on the one end, we had actors apologizing for their skin color, which doesn't strike me as a particularly healthy dynamic. But at the other end, we had governors in swing states like Governor Roy Cooper, J.B. Pritzker of Illinois, and they were all saying some pretty interesting things and actually quite pragmatic things about, well, what was this whole thing about? Appealing to white voters. Let's not forget that only 32% of white men voted for Joe Biden.
Well, James, yeah, let me actually just jump in because we both read this very interesting article by one of my favorite people on the left, Matt Stoller, in Compact yesterday, where he wondered whether Kamala Harris would be Hillary Clinton 2.0. That was in the Compact headline. And this white dudes and Karens for Kamala, even just the way that it looks, kind of reminds me of those fight song videos that I think those were officially sanctioned by the Clinton campaign back in 2016. Celebrities all heaping praise on Hillary Clinton as though this is America's destiny. It's already done, written in the stars. This, to me, does kind of feel like, Matt was writing about the policy questions that are really important, things like antitrust in particular, and whether Kamala Harris will listen to the likes of Reid Hoffman, who have written her checks recently, but also demanded that they axe Lena Khan and go into some of those populist policies. But even this tone, it feels like glossy and almost entitled to Kamala Harris in the Oval Office. And that's just sort of a vibe. But it does remind me a lot of how there was this sense of destiny surrounding Hillary Clinton, first female president. Kamala Harris would be the first female president, obviously the first Black female president. It just feels like we're going back to that in a sense. But you have a good point to make as well about some of the bench here on the left that Kamala Harris could tap for her vice presidential pick too.
Well, yes, and the difference is there is, and I want to refer to a book that your other co-host, Ryan Grimm, wrote, and he basically makes the point that it was Hillary that introduced identity politics, or at least accelerated identity politics within the Democrat Party. And this has become basically a permanent tension ever since 2016. You could see with Bernie, his 2016 primary campaign was very different from his 2020 campaign, where he really tried to dial up the identity politics in that 2020 to try and appeal to essentially non-white Democratic voters. And we're seeing much the same thing happening now. Kamala really can't seem to decide whether she wants to lean into that aspect of the message or focus on the policy and keep it economic. But if you look at J.B. Pritzker of Illinois, if you look at Josh Shapiro of Pennsylvania, all these governors, they're not interested in the identity politics. They're trying to be pragmatic, bipartisan, because they know they need to appeal to those independents and moderates to swing their states. And that's a message that Kamala Harris should really try and take all the way to the White House.
Well, Josh Shapiro, I think, is particularly deft at this. J.B. Pritzker has fallen down the identity politics rabbit hole for myriad reasons, just part of this sort of philanthropic, multi-billionaire family that's given to trans causes and has gone in a lot of directions that I think are a vulnerability for him and for Democrats politically if Kamala Harris looked to J.B. Pritzker as a vice presidential pick. Tim Walz, though, that's the guy that's been generating massive interest. He's been auditioning across cable news, or across, I should just say, news in general. And he's the governor of Minnesota. He has done basically a full-fledged Democratic agenda. He's enacted it in Minnesota sort of fearlessly without any sense of shame or needing to hide that these are Democratic priorities. Obviously, Donald Trump is really, really, really popular in rural northern areas of Minnesota, particularly. Those are areas that when Joe Biden was still at the top of the ticket, Republicans were actually talking about whether they could win Minnesota. So, we kind of laughed at that. Trump would win Wisconsin. But now that Tim Walz is out ahead, it looks like Kamala Harris might be choosing between two very good Democratic candidates, two very good, genuinely very, very competitive potential VP picks in Josh Shapiro or Tim Walz. And as far as I can see, those are the ones that are at the top of her list right now.
That seems to be confirmed by a lot of the reports that are coming out. We've had other governors like Roy Cooper who've actually withdrawn from the race. But CNN claims that we will have a decision by August 7th. So whether it's one of those two, we will have to see.
Head over to undercurrents.tv for a lot more.